There's this weird thing that happens around 7 p.m. The day is technically over, you don't have anything left, you have asterisk to do, and instead of feeling that soft exhale of relief, instead of feeling like you finally get to rest, you just feel nothing, a flatness. Like the day was a sentence that trailed off without a period. So you pick up your phone, not because you want anything specific, not because you're expecting a message. You just pick it up and you start moving through apps the way you'd wander through a house you've lived in so long you've stopped seeing the rooms. You check Instagram, you already checked it 12 minutes ago, nothing has changed, you check it anyway. And somewhere in the back of your mind there's this quiet voice, not loud enough to cause real panic, just there, saying something like, "Is this it?" I want to talk about that voice today because I think a lot of us have it, and I think most of us have gotten very good at drowning it out, and I think that maybe the drowning out is part of the problem. Let me start with something I noticed about myself a while back that genuinely unsettled me. I was on a vacation, real one, the kind you save up for, different country, good weather, nothing I needed to do, and on the second day I caught myself lying by the pool feeling bored, not physically uncomfortable, not tired, just that specific kind of bored where your brain is fully awake and has nothing it wants to lock onto. And my first instinct, automatic like breathing, was to reach for my phone. And I stopped myself. I literally put it down and made myself sit there. And I remember thinking, I flew hours to get here, I paid real money for this exact moment of having nothing to do, why does it feel like punishment? That question stuck with me for months, because it pointed to something that I think a lot of us are living inside of without fully realizing it. Something that explains not just the phone reaching but the strange hollowness of days that should feel full. The exhaustion that doesn't go away after you sleep. The sense that time is moving but life isn't, all of it. It comes down to this: we've confused stimulation with meaning, and now our brains literally can't tell the difference anymore. Here's what I mean. For most of human history, the feeling of aliveness, that sense of yes, I am here, I am present, this matters, came from things that required something from you. A real conversation where you didn't know where it was going, a project you weren't sure you could finish, a walk somewhere unfamiliar, physical discomfort followed by physical relief, the actual stakes of actual life. These things created what you might call asterisk earned presence. You had to show up for them, and in showing up, you felt alive. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. Somewhere along the way, and it wasn't sudden, it crept in slowly, update by update, feature by feature, we got handed an alternative. An entire ecosystem built to give you the feeling of aliveness without requiring anything from you, without risk, without effort, without the chance of failure or embarrassment or boredom. Infinite scroll, autoplay, notification badges, trending sounds, reaction buttons, comment sections, the next video, the next post, the next tiny hit of something. And look, I'm not here to do the whole technology bad thing. That's not what this is. That's too simple and you've heard it before, and honestly it doesn't help. What I'm actually interested in is what this has done to the asterisk texture asterisk of daily experience. What it's done to the way a regular Tuesday feels. Because here's what happened to a lot of us. We didn't become addicted in some dramatic sense. We didn't lose jobs or relationships to our phones in obvious ways. We just slowly, almost imperceptibly, lost our tolerance for the kind of quiet that meaning requires. Think about the last time you were genuinely bored for more than 10 minutes without reaching for something. Not trying to be provocative with that question, I'm genuinely asking you to think about it. Because for a lot of people the honest answer is, I can't remember. And that's not a character flaw, that's not laziness, that's what happens when you've spent years living in an environment that punishes pause. Every moment of quiet is filled. Every moment of waiting in line in traffic in the first few seconds before sleep is colonized by content. And it feels harmless. It feels like you're just making use of dead time. But what's actually happening is that you're training your nervous system to treat stillness as a problem to be solved rather than a state to be inhabited. And then the cost shows up later, quietly, at 7 p.m., in the form of a day that felt busy but somehow empty, in the form of going to bed feeling like nothing actually happened even though technically a lot happened, in the form of that voice asking, is this it? There's a concept in psychology called asterisk hedonic adaptation. The basic idea is that humans are extraordinarily good at adjusting to new baselines. You get a raise, you feel great for a few weeks, then the new salary becomes normal. You move to a beautiful city, you stop noticing the skyline within months. It's a feature actually. It's what lets us survive loss. It's what keeps us from being overwhelmed by every change. But hedonic adaptation applies to pleasure too. And when your pleasure inputs are constant and high volume, when the stimulation is genuinely never-ending, adaptation doesn't just normalize the highs, it raises the floor of what feels tolerable asterisk. Real life, ordinary Tuesday life starts to feel inadequate by comparison, not because your life is bad. Because your baseline has been quietly recalibrated by 10,000 microdoses of content designed specifically to be more interesting than whatever else you were doing. And this is where I want to be really clear about something, because this is the part that usually gets left out of these conversations. This isn't your fault in the way you probably think it is. The people who build these platforms are not stupid. They're not accidentally compelling. There are literal teams, massive, well-funded, brilliant teams, whose entire job is to figure out the exact psychological mechanisms that keep you engaged one more second, one more scroll, one more video. They run A/B tests on the color of notification badges. They study the precise interval of reward that creates the most compulsive checking behavior. They know more about your brain's dopamine system than most people who went to medical school. You are not weak for finding it hard to put your phone down. You are a normal human brain in contact with something that was engineered with enormous resources specifically to be hard to put down. I'm not saying that to let you off the hook entirely. I'm saying it because the shame spiral of why can't I just have more discipline is not only painful, it's also based on a misunderstanding. You're not fighting your own laziness. You're fighting something that was designed by experts to beat you. Recognizing that is not an excuse. It's the beginning of actually understanding what you're dealing with. But here's where I want to shift gears, because the stimulation thing, as real as it is actually only half the picture. There's another reason days feel empty. And this one is harder to talk about because it involves something we don't really have language for yet. It involves the difference between asterisk doing things and doing things that mean something to you. And this is where things get a little uncomfortable in a different way. A lot of us, and I mean a lot, have built lives that are objectively fine. Decent jobs, some friends, some hobbies that we tell people we have but don't really do that much, a routine that functions, and yet underneath all of it there's this persistent low-grade sense that something is off, not wrong enough to be a crisis, just off, like you're living someone else's schedule, following someone else's idea of what a good day looks like. Psychologist Viktor Frankl wrote about something he called the asterisk existential vacuum, this experience of inner emptiness that he noticed in his patients, and he wrote about it in the 1960s, before smartphones, before social media, before TikTok. The man was describing a problem that existed in people who had what would now look like gloriously distraction-free lives, and his point was that the emptiness wasn't coming from the outside. It was coming from a lack of asterisk directedness, a lack of something you're genuinely oriented toward. He wasn't talking about purpose in the capital P inspirational poster sense. He wasn't saying you need a grand mission. He was talking about something more immediate and more honest than that. He was talking about the feeling of reaching toward something that matters to you specifically for reasons that are genuinely yours. And here's the thing about modern life that I find really fascinating and kind of devastating at the same time. We have more options than any humans who have ever lived, more careers available to us, more relationships possible, more ways to spend a weekend, a year, a life. And somehow, and this sounds paradoxical, but it's extremely well documented, that abundance of options has made it harder, not easier, to feel like we're oriented toward anything. Because when everything is possible, choosing becomes terrifying. Every choice you make is simultaneously a rejection of 10,000 other choices. And so a lot of us, consciously or not, resolve this by just not fully choosing. We keep things vague. We stay in the figuring it out phase for years. We consume content about people living lives we admire instead of building something of our own. Not because we're cowards, but because the risk of committing to something and having it go wrong, or not being good at it, or being judged for it, that risk feels very large when you've been trained to optimize for comfort. And so the days pass, full of activity, full of content, full of technically productive moments, but missing that through line, missing the sense of this is what I'm building, and today I moved it forward. And that's the emptiness, not the absence of things to do, the absence of something you're actually reaching toward. Let me tell you something that I think is quietly true about the people who watch videos like this one. You haven't given up? That's actually important, because there's a version of this life where the discomfort gets muffled so effectively that you stop noticing it, where the stimulation is sufficient enough that the question of "is this it" never quite surfaces, where you're not watching something like this because it doesn't occur to you that things could feel different. The fact that you're here means the quiet voice is still audible. The fact that you clicked on a video called "The Reason Your Days Feel Empty" means some part of you is still honest enough to admit that yours sometimes do. And I think that matters more than it sounds like it does. Because the people I've known, and I suspect you've known them too, the ones who genuinely seem to feel alive, who have that quality of asterisk presence that makes you feel better just by being around them, they're not the ones who have solved everything. They're not the ones whose lives are objectively the most impressive. They're the ones who are still engaged with the question, still reaching, still bothered by the gap between how things are and how they could be. That bothered feeling, that's not a malfunction, that's the signal working correctly. So here's the part where I'd normally give you a list. 5 habits to add meaning to your day, 3 questions to journal every morning, and I'm not going to do that. Not because those things are useless, but because I think we've been handed so many lists that we've started to confuse reading about changing with actually changing, and that distinction is worth pausing on. What I want to offer instead is a single shift in perspective that I think underlies everything else. Stop asking what you should do, start asking what you're willing to feel. Here's what I mean by that. Most of the things that make life feel genuinely full, real relationships, creative work, physical challenge, learning something difficult, building something that might fail, they all share one quality. They make you feel things that aren't entirely comfortable. Vulnerability, uncertainty, the specific frustration of being a beginner, the weird grief of caring about something, the exposure of wanting something publicly enough that people can see if you don't get it. Comfort-seeking, which is what so much of our digital behavior actually is fundamentally about avoiding those feelings. And the tragedy is that in avoiding them, we also avoid the aliveness that lives on the other side of them. So the question isn't what productive habit should I add? The question is, what would you do today if you were genuinely willing to feel uncomfortable? Not for the whole day, not as a permanent lifestyle, just what's one thing that you've been orbiting, thinking about, researching, almost starting, that you haven't done because it requires feeling something you'd rather not feel? Because that thing, that's probably the direction. And here's where the practical stuff lives, and I want to be specific rather than vague because vague advice is worse than no advice. The stimulation problem is real and it needs to be addressed directly, not with willpower. Willpower is a finite resource and using it to fight billion-dollar systems is a losing strategy long-term. What actually works is redesigning the environment so the default action changes. Your phone being the first thing you see in the morning isn't a neutral fact. It's a choice someone made and you can make a different one. Putting it in another room when you sleep is not a radical act. It's not a monk practice. It's just changing what the first morning moment points toward. And that first moment matters more than people realize because it sets the register of the day. It decides whether your first conscious act is reaching toward your own thoughts or immediately consuming someone else's. The same logic applies to the spaces in your day that you've been filling. The commute, the lunch, the 10 minutes before bed. These aren't dead time. These are some of the only unstructured moments your brain gets to do the thing it actually needs to do: wander, connect, surface what's actually going on. The shower thoughts that everyone claims to have. They happen because the shower is one of the last places most of us haven't colonized with content. Your brain is not broken when it feels restless in the quiet. It's recalibrating, and that recalibration is exactly what shows you what you actually want, what's actually bothering you, what you actually think. You can't access any of that if you never give it airtime. The other thing, the meaning thing, the directionality thing, that one is slower and more personal. And I can't hand you someone else's answer because someone else's answer won't stick in your life the way an answer that came from you will. But I can tell you this, the way most people find it is not through thinking about it more. It's through doing things small enough to feel safe and then noticing what makes them lose track of time, what makes them forget to check their phone, what they do even if no one was going to see it or praise them for it, what kind of tired feels good afterward rather than just hollow. You probably already have some sense of this. There's probably already something you keep coming back to, keep reading about, keep imagining yourself doing more of. And there's probably a reason you haven't fully committed to it. And that reason is almost certainly about how it would feel if it didn't work out, or what people would think, or the particular vulnerability of wanting something real. And that's exactly the feeling I was talking about earlier, the one on the other side of which is the thing you're actually looking for. We talk a lot in this culture about finding yourself, like you're a lost set of keys, like the self is a fixed thing hidden somewhere and the project is just locating it. But I think it's more accurate to say you're building yourself, continuously, out of the choices you make about where you point your attention and what you're willing to reach toward and which discomforts you decide are worth tolerating. The self isn't hiding from you, it's waiting to see what you do next. And the reason this matters, the reason I keep coming back to it, is that so much of modern life is designed to keep that process on hold, to keep you in consuming mode rather than creating mode, in receiving mode rather than reaching mode, not through malice exactly, just through the logic of systems that profit when you stay passive. People like us, and I genuinely mean that, people who are sitting with this kind of question, who haven't fully outsourced their inner life to an algorithm, we're not going to fix this with willpower and morning routines and productivity hacks. We're going to fix it by slowly, imperfectly, persistently doing the thing that the passive mode keeps interrupting, actually reaching towards something, actually letting ourselves want things out loud, actually tolerating the texture of a life that's being built rather than just consumed. It won't always feel momentous. Most of the time, it'll feel ordinary. A Tuesday where you worked on something you care about for 40 minutes and it was frustrating and slow and you're not sure it's going anywhere. That Tuesday is more alive than the Tuesday where everything was smooth and nothing was risked. I want to end with something honest. I don't have this figured out. I still check my phone more than I should. I still have evenings where I can feel the flatness settling in, and I still sometimes just let it. I still sometimes choose the comfortable thing over the true thing. But I think there's something valuable in just numbing what's happening, in being honest enough to say, the way a lot of our days are structured is not feeding us the way we hoped it would. The life we were told to want and the life that actually makes us feel alive are sometimes pointing in different directions. And noticing that gap, not with shame but with curiosity, is the beginning of something real. You're not alone in this. The flatness you sometimes feel at 7 p.m., the picking up the phone without knowing why, the sense that days are passing without quite landing, that's not just you. That's a lot of us, living in the same weird moment in history, trying to figure out how to be human inside systems that weren't entirely built with that in mind. And the fact that we're still asking the question, still noticing, still bothered, still reaching, I genuinely think that counts for something. I want to ask you one thing before you go, and I'm asking because I'm genuinely curious, not to generate engagement or whatever. What's something you used to do, some version of a thing, some activity or habit or just a way of spending time that made life feel more real and that you've slowly let slip away? Not something you think you should do, something that, when you actually did it, made you feel like yourself. Leave it in the comments, genuinely, because I think we might remind each other of things we forgot we needed. And if this conversation is the kind you want to keep having, the honest, slightly uncomfortable, doesn't trap everything up neatly kind, then stick around. We're figuring this out together, that's kind of the whole point.